Welcome back to the Claude Certified Architect course with Typical Monk. Class 2. What is Claude? Last class we learned what the CCAF credential is and why designing with AI is such a valuable skill. But you cannot architect with a material you do not understand. So today we get to know Claude itself, deeply and practically. We will start from the ground, what a frontier model actually is, and how it went from merely predicting text to genuinely reasoning and taking action with tools. Then we will meet the Claude model family, Opus, Sonnet, Haiku, and Fable, and learn how to choose between them by weighing real capability dimensions like context, reasoning, and price. And finally, we will map the four surfaces through which you actually use Claude: the chat app, the API, Claude Code, and managed agents. Because a good architect knows not just what the model can do, but every doorway through which it can be put to work. Every one of these is on the exam, and every one is a tool you will reach for. By the end, Claude will not be a mysterious oracle to you. It will be a well-understood set of materials you can design with confidently. And that word, materials, is deliberate. Just as a building architect must know steel from timber from glass, an AI architect must know which model, which surface, and which capability fits each job, and iterative. The design flows from knowing the material. In Hindi and English together, one idea at a time. Here is today's map: 6 ideas that turn Claude from a black box into a material you know. First, what a frontier model really is, at a concept level. Second, the Claude model family, the 4 models, and what each is for. Third, the capability dimensions you weigh when choosing one. Fourth, the 4 surfaces for using Claude. Fifth, a closer look at each: chat, API, Claude Code, and managed agents. And sixth, the console that ties it together, and the architect's starting point, one idea at a time. Let us begin with what Claude actually is, underneath the friendly chat window. At its heart, Claude is a large language model, a system trained on an enormous amount of text until it became extraordinarily good at one thing: given some text, predicting what should come next. From that single ability flows everything: answering questions, writing code, summarizing, translating. It is worth pausing on how surprising this is. Nobody programmed grammar or facts into it by hand. Those abilities emerged on their own, from learning to predict text at an enormous scale and 200 of, which is exactly why it generalizes to tasks no one anticipated. You put in your text, a prompt and some context, and it produces text back. But it has grown far beyond simple prediction. A frontier model like Claude does not just complete sentences. It reasons, walking through problems step by step, and it produces genuine understanding, not just plausible words. This is why a modern model can solve a problem it has never seen. It is not fishing for a memorized answer, but actually working the problem through, much as you would on paper, which is a fundamentally different and more trustworthy thing. And the newest leap is the biggest. Claude can now use tools and act. Give it the ability to call a function, search a database, or run code, and it stops merely talking about a task and starts actually doing it. The foundation of everything we call agentic. Hold on to this shift, because it reframes the whole course. The moment a model can act, your job stops being, how do I get a good answer, and becomes, how do I design a safe, reliable system around something that can take real actions in the world. So the takeaway: Claude is a frontier model that predicts, reasons, and now acts. And it is that final ability to act through tools that makes it something an architect can truly build systems around. Claude is not one model, but a family, and your very first architectural decision is which member to use. Let us meet all 4. At the top sits Opus, the flagship. It is the most powerful for the hardest agentic and coding work, the one you reach for when the task is genuinely difficult and quality matters above all. It is also the most expensive, so you spend it wisely. A useful rule of thumb: prototype on the strongest model to prove the idea works at all. Then step down to a cheaper one for production once you know what the task truly requires and A212. That way, you never overpay for capability you are not using. In the middle sits Sonnet, the balanced workhorse and the right default for most applications. It offers the best blend of speed and intelligence, smart enough for the great majority of real tasks while staying fast and affordable at scale. In practice, a huge fraction of production systems run happily on the balanced model, reaching for the flagship only on the hardest slices of the work and 80-12, a pattern of mixing models that a good architect designs in deliberately. And in the specialists, Haiku, the fastest and cheapest, built for high volume, low latency work like classification and quick replies, and Fable, Anthropic's most capable widely released model for the very hardest reasoning and long horizon tasks. So the takeaway, Opus, Sonnet, Haiku, and Fable, one family, 4 models, and the architect's craft is matching the model to the job, rather than always reaching for the biggest. So how do you actually choose between them? Not by gut feeling, but by weighing a handful of concrete dimensions. Let us name the 6 that matter most. First, the context window, how much text the model can read at once from your prompt and documents, and the output ceiling, how much it can write back in a single response. Together, they set the size of the job it can handle. Then, reasoning, whether the model supports a deeper thinking mode for hard problems, and vision, whether it can read images, charts, and screenshots, not just text. And finally, the 2 that decide real-world fit, tool use quality, how reliably it can call functions and act as an agent, and price, the cost per million tokens, which at scale can dominate every other consideration. This one catches beginners constantly. A design that feels cheap for 100 test calls can become ruinously expensive at 1,000,000 real ones. So an architect always does the arithmetic before, not after, shipping. So the takeaway, context, output, reasoning, vision, tool use, and price, these 6 levers are how you compare models honestly and pick the right one for a given design, instead of guessing. Knowing the models is half the picture. The other half is knowing the ways you actually reach them. There are 4 distinct surfaces, and the exam expects you to know all of them. The first is Claude II, the consumer chat application in your browser. No code, no setup, you simply talk to Claude. It is where most people begin, and where you explore ideas. The second is the Claude API, the Messages API, where you write code to build Claude directly into your own application. This is the architect's main canvas. The third is Claude Code, a coding agent that lives right in your terminal, able to read, write, and run your code. And the fourth is Managed Agents, agents that Anthropic itself hosts and runs for you, so you define the goal and they execute the loop. So the takeaway, Claude II, the API, Claude Code, and Managed Agents. 4 surfaces, 4 different ways to put Claude to work. And this course, like the exam, covers every one. Notice a pattern hiding here. As you move from Claude Bot AI to the API to Claude Code to Managed Agents, you take on more power and more control, but also more responsibility for building the harness around the model and 802 Hove. That trade is the whole story of these 4 surfaces. Let us look more closely at the first 2 surfaces, because they represent 2 very different relationships with Claude. On one side is Claude II, the consumer chat app. There is no code involved at all. You open it in a browser and have a conversation. It is perfect for exploring, drafting, and everyday work, and it is how you get a feel for what the model can do before you build anything. On the other side is the Claude API, the Messages API. Here you are no longer a user chatting. You are a builder, writing code that sends messages to Claude and handles its replies, weaving the model into a product of your own. The distinction is the heart of the practitioner versus architect divide from last class. Chat is for using Claude. The API is for building with it. So the takeaway, Claude II lets a person use Claude directly, while the API lets you embed Claude inside your own application. One is the doorway, the other is the foundation. And the leap between them is exactly the leap this course is about. Anyone can chat, but the architect learns to build an 82 to turn a conversation that works once into a system that works reliably for thousands every day. Now, the other two surfaces, the ones built for autonomy, where Claude does more than answer. The first is Claude Code, a coding agent that lives in your terminal. It is not a chat window. It can actually read your files, write new code, run commands, and fix its own mistakes, working alongside you like a tireless pair programmer. For the developer, it is a genuinely different way to build. The second is managed agents, agents that Anthropic hosts and runs on its own infrastructure. Instead of you building and running the agent loop yourself, you define the goal and the tools, and Anthropic's runtime carries out the multi-step work for you. The real distinction between all four surfaces comes down to two questions: who hosts the compute and who writes the harness, the code that drives the loop. Each surface answers those two questions differently. So the takeaway: Claude Code brings the agent into your terminal, and managed agents lift the whole agent into Anthropic's cloud. Two more surfaces, both built for Claude, that acts. The deep idea uniting them is autonomy. Instead of a human prompting once and reading a reply, the model is trusted to run a loop and A200 twofold. Think, act with the tool, observe the result, and repeat an A200 twofold, which is powerful and precisely why guardrails from last class matters so much here. Behind all of these surfaces sits one hub you will return to constantly and one place to keep learning. The first is the Anthropic console. This is your account and control center. It is where you manage billing, set usage limits, and, most importantly, create and manage the API keys that let your applications talk to Claude. Every builder starts here. The second is the Anthropic Academy, a growing library of free, official courses on Claude Code, the API, prompt engineering, and MCP, straight from the people who built the platform. It is the best primary source there is, and it costs nothing. Together, they cover the two things every architect needs: a place to manage access and a place to keep sharpening their knowledge. So, the takeaway: the console is where you get your keys and control your spend, and the academy is where you keep learning. The practical home base for everything you will build. A small but real tip for the exam and the job: guard your API keys like passwords, because they are in A212. A leaked key is someone else spending your money. So the console's key management is not busy work. It is basic security hygiene. Let us pull the whole class into the single mental model an architect actually uses at the start of any project. First, pick the model. Weigh the capability dimensions against your task and your budget, and choose Opus, Sonnet, Haiku, or Fable accordingly. This is your first real design decision. Second, pick the surface. Decide how the model will be reached: a chat, your own application through the API, an agent in the terminal, or a hosted managed agent. The surface shapes the whole architecture. And third, manage it in the console. Set up your keys, your limits, and your cost controls, so the system is safe and sustainable from day one. So the takeaway: model, pos surface, pos console, two decisions and a dashboard is where every Claude design begins, and today you have learned all three. Let us gather the whole class in one breath so it locks into memory. Claude is a frontier model that predicts, reasons, and now acts through tools. The family has 4 members: Opus, Sonnet, Haiku, and Fable, each suited to different work. You compare them across 6 dimensions: context, output, reasoning, vision, tool use, and price. There are 4 surfaces: Claude II, the API, Claude Code, and managed agents. The Anthropic console manages your keys, billing, and access, and the academy keeps you learning. And every design begins the same way: pick a model, pick a surface, and manage it in the console. Next class, a hands-on workshop, your very first Claude API call. One idea at a time. Know your material. A great architect never designs with a material they do not understand, and Claude is your material. Today, you learned what it truly is: a frontier model that has grown from predicting text to reasoning to acting through tools. You met its family: Opus, Sonnet, Haiku, and Fable, and the honest dimensions for choosing between them. and you map the four surfaces through which it reaches the world, and the console that governs them all. From here, we stop describing Claude and start building with it. Hands-on, one workshop at a time. Beginning next class with your very first live API call. Model, surface, console. That is where every design starts. One idea at a time. Now you know your material.